welcome everyone. I'm so glad that I can see most of the artists. I'm so glad we were able to come because it was really wonderful working with everyone, and I love the work. And so, you know, this is the opening for the Making Space online exhibition, and on the New York Artist Circle website. And and I'm really pleased as a member of the New York Artist Circle to have had the opportunity to curate this exhibition. And there are many strong exhibitions on our website. I'm pretty sure most of you have seen most of them, but this is the first sculpture exhibition. So I am proud to have curated that with Sarah, and I hope this is just the first of many, because there's so much one can do with sculpture. And I want to thank Lois Bender for encouraging me to do this exhibition.
My pleasure. Okay.
Yeah. And I also want to thank her for all the work she's done leading the curatorial program on our website. So thank you.
Thank you.
And my work is grounded in textile practices. I work three-dimensionally, and I attempt to create a bridge between past traditions and more contemporary approaches through the use of non-traditional materials. And I want to make the undervalued and unseen culture of women's lives visible. And I've known Sarah Haviland for many years as a friend and colleague. I won't say, but I have always loved her work and was thrilled when she agreed to curate this with me. And I've really enjoyed working with her. Now I'm sorry, it's going to end. But anyway, so I'm going to pass it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Eileen. I will admit that I was extremely happy to be invited to work with Eileen Hoffman to curate this exhibition, online exhibition of the New York Artist Circle members who focus on sculpture. I'm a sculptor, longtime sculptor, and I have long been a fan of Eileen's artwork. And I also really admire her central role in this community of the New York Artist Circle. And she and many others have been doing a fantastic job. So I want to add that since Eileen and I have followed each other's sculptural work and development over a long time, I think in this process, we experienced a kind of meeting of minds, shared ideas we had verbally, maybe never shared them before, about the spatial and the physical qualities that I think make sculpture and installation work exciting and also challenging. And like Eileen, in my work, I've turned to non-traditional materials in my work, representing women and birds, it happens, in semi-figurative form that reflect on historical and contemporary life. And I really want to stress that among the members of the New York Artist Circle, we looked at many artworks, and we discovered, we had to limit the number, but we discovered fantastic artworks incorporating diverse materials, which you will see and can explore, and fascinating content that we are very excited to share in more depth today. And I think we're both pleased to continue these kinds of important conversations, both visually and publicly, with these remarkable artists in Making Space.
Great, thank you. So at many openings, we go through the show, the exhibition online, and show the pieces. And instead of doing that tonight, we put together a slideshow that has the work and some close-ups sometimes and a few videos, since it's always, you know, more interesting to see sculpture three-dimensionally in space. So I am going to share my screen and show the slideshow. Hold on one second. Okay. Back to, here it is. And I just wanted to ask Susan Knight, in your video, it comes with sound. Did you want that sound as part of it, or should it be turned off? You can just unmute and let me know that.
Turned off.
Okay, thanks. And okay, Lori, I'm about to get started.
Okay.
You can start reading, yeah.
Okay. This work is by Seema. Wishing to honor my grandmother and missing her voice delivering support and encouragement when I was growing up, I created a soundtrack loop. Family photos, papers, and found objects might encourage viewers to remember their own family legacies.
And we have the soundtrack.
But now I'm back to normal. I've got all my plants back to life again. My violet is doing wonderful. And be well and happy. Keep the good work up. Don't work too hard. And that's all I can say to you. I enjoy hearing your voice very, very much. You'll be hearing from me again. It's a great big kiss, and it's from Grandma. Now don't forget. Bye-bye. 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 Bye-bye.
Janet Goldner, bridging diverse cultures, my steel sculptures and installations celebrate the unique beauty and genius of each, as well as what we share. My art traces my enduring exploration of sculptural form, ongoing relationship with African culture, and lifelong involvement in social activism. Stacy Bogdanoff. Shelter 20 came about after long, cold walks in the woods, those first months of quarantine for COVID. The landscape looked bleak, dry, colorless, and inhospitable at first, but when I looked closer, I found signs of shelter, safety, and life just waiting for spring. Barbara Loveliner. I abstract, alter, and reconstruct the female figure to express complex associations. Creating the sculptures helps make sense of my immediate experience, often finding humor and gaining insight into layers of meaning in our contemporary world and the shared primal world of generations of women.
And Robin Jordan, you're going to read next. Can you unmute yourself?
I did. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Janet Steinhardt. This sheltered vessel represents all women who are now left shattered and reduced to lesser than equal humans by losing the right to their own autonomy of choice about their bodies. I was one of you. I am one of you. Satra Stucco. I make fictional household appliances and related objects. My appliances put the viewer at the center of the experience of the work. In order to use them, it's necessary to walk around them and gesture, dance for them to perform their function. Leah Kohler. An artist's dream space in polychrome, a palette of possibilities, may inform the next work, perhaps a chef d'oeuvre. Gail Rothstein. This assemblage sculpture represents a more recent departure from much of my previous work of landscape and destination orientated sculptures. I wanted to experiment with freestanding pieces that make a narrative statement in a single centrally located space.
Okay, Susan Knight, are you ready to read?
Yes. Yes. Olivia Beans. I work in clay and mixed media, creating sculpture that is inspired by the sacred and profane. World cultures, mythology, spirituality, and ritual, along with personal experience, directly inform these works. Lori Horowitz. Sitting in the shadows represents a time and a place of isolation where home and assimilation are important social issues relevant to our current climate. The delicate nature of humanity is portrayed through these ephemeral forms, creating haunting shadows as important as the physical beings. Phyllis Rosser. Using wood stripped bare of its bark and washed smooth by the Connecticut River, I make dynamic wall-hung sculptures that invite contemplation. I attempt to capture the enduring aspect of nature as well as the beauty expressed by the ravages of time. Jenny Ta. I love donkeys, and this was inspired from observing them in Mexico. The young woman is holding its elongated tail as she grows her own set of hooves and ears, and her external backbone is meant to represent her strength. And
Thank
Jen
you.
Talk will read next.
Hello, thank you. Susan Beeler Snyder. My process for the rope work is to start with an informal warp and weft and build on top. The work is intuitive and spontaneous. There are no sketches, only an idea in my head about size and shape and emotions that drives the process. Here, emotions of a failing marriage. Robin Jordan. If there is fodder for creating, I will consume. I use and remake umbrella detritus. These umbrella and fabric strips are the small scraps collected from larger projects. They are chain stitched and hand sewn onto a welded, deconstructed steel mesh substrate.
And she actually edited her statement, so I'm going to read the edited version for Scarlet is from a series called Traits. I deconstructed fake plastic flowers, hand-stitched laces, and dyed fabrics onto the naked plastic stems mounted on a forged steel substrate, an interactive part of the sculpture enabling repositioning. And I have a video. Okay, keep going, Jenny. You've been doing great.
Okay. Next we have Frances Vi Wilson. Each of the social warrior sculptures, including Stand Your Ground, is a call to action meant to inspire the human qualities of strength, resilience, and bravery to rise up and join the fight on the many new social battlegrounds. Eleanor Goldstein. An artist's mission is to respond to our current world of chaos. When hands are separated from our bodies, they become, with their silence and isolation, a powerful tool of expression.
Stacy?
I'm up.
Hey,
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, it's my honor to present Cecilia Andre. This large, transparent piece hanging from trees parallel to the ground was created as part of my Enclave Garden Project Fellowship. The sequence of colors that follows that of a rainbow in an array of square-shaped vinyl pieces that allows visitors to interact with the colored cast shadows. And for everyone else, I looked it up. So further explanation, Enclave Garden Project is a nonprofit that is supporting contemporary BIPOC artists.
Oh, thank you.
First time I put some large paintings into a naturescape in Governor's Island on a fence. There was that huge greenery around it, and it gives you another measure, you know, of space, of viewing things. And I think it's a collaboration with nature, and I also feel like from the point of view of a viewer, it's interesting to be surprised that in a place that they're not expecting to see art, then suddenly they're like, how can I define this, you know, and then they come to the realization it's art. So I like it.
This artist is Susan Knight. Soil particles have been uncovered, supersized, and hand cut with a repeated pattern, which allows them to open up, to become porous, and float in the light of day. Scientists use the same colors to code soil samples. I think we owe thanks to Eileen, and this is her work. As a young person, as I sat amongst people with textile projects in my hands, I became fascinated with the emotions and stories that we put into these projects. I want these pieces to make the undervalued and unseen culture of women's work visible. And last up, I think, and
Yes.
it's so beautiful, is Sarah Haviland. This illuminated installation, designed for Manhattan's Flatiron Building, was intended to project hope and female energy. 5 winged figures in wire mesh suggest human-bird persona, combining strength and subtlety, movement and stability, earth and sky.
That's it. Thank you, readers. I am going to stop sharing. This is us in our installations.
Eileen, I have a question.
Yes.
Is it possible to do one recap of the show? People had a few questions about sizes and maybe materials for the panel, or is that?
Yeah, you mean, should I reshare again and go through?
The online show, because that's where the information is about materials.
Yes. Just give me a second to, oops.
I think as a sculptor, maybe even, you know, in addition to artists in general, we always look at the materials. What is something made out of? Because a lot is not, we can't always tell. And it's so interesting.
Okay. So I will, this is the exhibition online, what it looks like, just a quick, and I can go through each thing. And do you want to, do you want to take charge of this, Sarah? I'm not.
Mention for each one that here at the, you know, after the title and the artist are the materials and the size, which of course can be seen on the online show. But this first one by Sima was smoke, fired clay, life mask, family photos, found objects, 24 karat gold leaf. And as we heard, the voice of my grandmother linked by a scanning QR code, and it was 19 by 14 by 4 inches.
Okay.
Thanks. And Janet Goldner's box was welded steel, 22 by 24 by 8. And Stacy's shelter was mixed media. Here's the clue: cotton, wire, paper, and lacquer, 24 inches by 12 inches by 8 inches. And Barbara's private choice public fight was stoneware, that is fired clay, wood, and metal. 7 by 12 by 12 was one of them, and 10 by 12 by 12 inches was the second. And Joanne Steinhardt's shattered vessel abortion, you could guess, was glass and wood, but also sculpey, wire, acrylic, stain, and glue. And it is only 3 inches by 6 inches by 3 inches. And Satre Stolke's portal is 3D printed plastic, aluminum, copper, plaster, and latex paint. And it's surprisingly large. It's 44 inches by 12 inches by 12 inches. And Leah Pollar's The Artist Bed in Polychrome is cast bronze, 14 by 11 by 5 inches, the size of a pallet, I think.
Hmm.
Gail Rothstein's Holy Grail Redux was mixed media. She doesn't tell us what, but you can peer at it and figure out, found a lot of found objects, 29 by 16 by 9 inches. And Olivia Bean's spiraling was glazed ceramic, 13 inches by 9 by 9. And Lori Horowitz, Sitting in the Shadows, as we heard, was aluminum wire and black wire mesh, and very importantly, shadow, 36 by 24 by 24 inches. And Phyllis Rosser's cumulonimbus was acrylic on wood, 42 by 89 by 11 inches. That's large. And Jenny Toth's Donkey Girl was cast bronze, 3 inches by 12 inches by 5 inches. And Susan Beeler Snyder's Broken used natural manila rope. It was shown at the Children's Museum of the Arts, New York, and it's 100 inches by 36 by 24 inches. And Robin Jordan's Scarlet, as we also heard, was fabric, thread, plastic, and steel, 12.5 inches by 23 by 12 inches. And Frances Vi Wilson's Stand Your Ground is made out of cambium fiber from Asian mulberry tree and branch, 26 inches by 17 by 8 inches. An Eleanor Goldstein installation, Out of Wreckage We Rise, was made with found wood, bronze, plaster of Paris, crushed steel, broken mirror, and paint, 13 by 132 by 20 inches. Cecilia Andre's Rainbow Squared was tulle and vinyl an installation at the Queen's Botanical Garden, and it was approximately 36 inches by 144 by very thin 0.03 inches. And Susan Knight's core sampling magic, made of hand-cut Tyvek on paper, acrylic ink, was 180 by 180 by 180 squared installation. And Eileen Hoffman's The Stories Remain was chenille stems mixed media on Duralar, 125 inches by 108 by 37 inches. And my own Rise Above installation used steel galvanized mesh and lights, and 10 feet by 11 feet by 6 feet in the triangular window installation.
Thank you. That was
Thanks.
great. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that was really good. Thank you. So what we plan next for the second half is we would like to have a small panel and ask some of the artists a few questions. Let's see. I think we are just going to do this one-on-one so people aren't spotlighted for a while they're not speaking. So to start, the first question that we have for people is, so making sculpture brings with it a whole host of problems to be solved, including fabricating and building it, shipping, storage, financing. So you have to love it to stick with it. Sometimes I feel like it's, it's like a completely impractical occupation. So you have to love it. And you have to be committed to that form of creating, to stick with it. So what we would like to know is, what is it about your message, what you want to say, that you think is best articulated three-dimensionally? And how does this approach allow you to express your intentions? And I think also going with that is, most of us love just making things and using the materials. So that goes without, but I mean, that's a big part because not everybody does. So, and we're going to start with Janet Goldner.
Hello. So that was a long list of requirements, but I don't really think about those things. It's just how I've always thought. It's just how my ideas come to me. So shipping and financing, and I suppose painters have to buy whatever they're using too, but it's just the way I think. So that's why that's why I stick with it, because I don't really have any choice, and especially at this point after all these years.
Great reply.
Yeah.
But what about it? You feel best articulates what you want to say, or that's.
I work in sculpture and installation. I also include photography and video. So I work in a lot of different media, depending on what the idea seems to call for.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been making welded steel sculptures for a very long time because I really like welding, basically. And I mean, I like you, Eileen, I actually started out as a fiber artist, and I was a weaver for a long time. And I was using wire mesh to make my weavings, the armatures for my weavings. And I felt like I didn't have enough control over the form. And so I stopped weaving. I was putting a woven skin over this form, and I stopped weaving and started using wire mesh, and then gradually welded steel as the visual element. And one of the things that's interesting is that the fiber part never really left me. So I've always been weaving things, and sometimes I weave strips of the steel in and out of each other. And lately I've been working with raffia and wire. And so the weaving seems to be coming back into my work many years later. So it's, I don't really feel like it's consciously directed. I feel like I often start doing something and I don't really get that what I'm doing until years later I see, oh, that's what I've been doing. So
Great.
it's a very intuitive led process.
Great. That was great. Thanks for fleshing that out.
Yes.
Okay, Lori Horowitz.
Yeah, hi. I think that artists are more comfortable either working two-dimensionally or three-dimensionally. And two-dimensional artists take what they see or take their ideas and pretty much collapse them onto one plane, where sculptors are more in tune with what's around them and their surroundings. So you're really taking images and extruding them three-dimensionally. And I also think it's easier just by touch and feel to create three-dimensionally. I could have my eyes shut and still create something because I can feel it and know how it should feel three-dimensionally. I've also worked as a set designer in the past, and I love the idea of working in relief as well as three-dimensional and keeping in mind sight lines and how things look close to three-dimensionally. And in this particular piece that I did, Sitting in the Shadows, I gave myself a prompt, and that was creating a sculpture that mimicked, that the shadow in this piece completely mimicked the sculpture. So you wouldn't be able to differentiate between one and the other if it was lit properly. So I'm very comfortable working in chicken wire. I think you can make anything out of chicken wire. The hard part was cladding it in black window screen. And that took hours and hours of sewing. And it didn't really want to cooperate. And hiding the seams was like making a fine garment, you know, trying to make it look like it just grew out of that. So the benefit of that is chicken wire is waterproof. It doesn't rust. Window screen is translucent, and it has as much material as it does have holes or space between it. So the finished pieces always weigh less than, you know, a pound or two and create tremendous volume. And by doing projections, I can make a monumental piece. I've done these projections up to 20 feet tall on these pieces. So I can have a fairly small piece and have it in a very large space. So it's pretty imposing. And in this piece, I wanted to create this woman who's hiding in the shadows, yet the shadow is this looming presence of what she stands for and her place in the world. So that's what this is about for me.
That was great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Robin Jordan, would you like to hear from you?
Sure. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Hmm?
Oh yeah. So I'm unmuted, right?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. I thought about these questions. Sculpture for me is it's like a present, you know, something like I start with a wrapped present, like a gift that somebody gives me. And it's always has made me feel curious what's inside. So when I start a piece of work, it's usually from things that I've gathered, laces, pieces of steel, whatever. I'm a real collector of fodder, things that most people don't really see the value in. And I start to put them together, but I'm starting from the outside, sort of going inside. I'm making it feels like I'm making a gift for myself. But really what I'm doing is I'm making something that comes alive from nothing. And so when I do sculpture, that's really, it's the tactile, it's the all around movement of shape and light and how it changes with the time of day or your feelings. That as a sculptor, that's the way I it's the object that of surprise, and I surprise myself because I don't ever start out with intention or motivation. It's those little things that are nothing that, you know, that it's excite me. That's about it.
It's great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Susan Knight, we would love to hear from you.
Thank you. And thank you for all of your work, Sarah, too, on this show. I've been using an X-Acto knife to cut Tyvek paper, Mylar, and more for 2 decades. But prior to that, I was a realist figurative oil painter. And even when I was painting those bodies and faces, I was painting in the round. I consciously was trying to get them. I was consciously thinking of space. So my involvement with installation now is, it just feels right. And the installation that is in this show is actually 15 feet by 15 feet, 15 feet high and 15 feet in diameter. And it's made of components that are collapsible. And it's not something that I pre-planned. I just discovered this way of cutting. Not all of my cutting is this regimented, and they just collapse, and many components are stacked in between 2 sheets of foam core. And I usually drive, but I have shipped the packets of foam core all over. And of course, you can imagine the smallest diameter in this show is 15 inches and the largest is 34 inches in diameter. But thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Frances Wilson. You're muted.
There we go.
Okay.
Hi, so nice to see everybody again. Well, there are a lot of questions on your prompts, so I don't really know where to start, but I do want to start, I think, by talking about my fiber, because it's an interesting, I think, genesis of what I do. So I think sometimes, like a good book, it finds you rather than you've gone out to search for it. So arrived in the mail when I was researching paper was a very small bundle of this fiber. When I opened it up, it was about 10 by 12 inches, and it was extremely resilient, pulled in one direction, but very porous. When you opened it up, you wetted it and opened it. So I spent about 2 years experimenting with this fiber and trying to find it in larger sections. So I set the alarm off in the apartment building by trying to burn it on the kitchen stove. I tried to paint on it. I tried everything, and I finally discovered that I could mold it. And given enough time, the mold would harden and I'd have something that was quite malleable and easy to work with. So this material I get directly from Laos. It's part of the paper industry, and I get it before it's shipped off in bundles to Thailand to be made into what I'm sure you've seen, the mulberry paper, which is a very thick paper used for scrapbooks and albums, and it's often embedded with flowers. But before it reaches that stage, it's very crude, and it's been harvested up in the mountains by very small family groups, and brought into a cooperative where it's just boiled and pressed. So that's how I get it. I have developed this molding that takes about 36 hours to harden. So on one occasion, I was trying to do Gaia, and I laid down on the studio floor and put this wet, gauzy fiber over my face and tried to breathe and tried to stay still. And my poor husband was devastated when he walked in and found me, but it melted. When I took it off and tried to protect it, it kept melting, so that one cheek would fall and one eye would fall, and I'd have to prop it up. And eventually over many hours, this thing shaped, but I hated her. She just was nothing like I had envisioned. So I don't have ultimate control. But I do want to just mention in this piece, because I think sometimes there's a moment that's a catalyst that you don't even realize. And certainly finding that the fiber was one, but I did this piece that you saw in red, and I was very determined to do it in red. And it has sort of a, I don't know, for some people, I don't think that's very appealing. But my father was in the Black Watch military, and there was a time when we donated all of his uniforms to a military museum. And it was at that moment that I realized how significant, it wasn't at that moment, it was probably a year later, I realized how significant it was. And so that red became the warrior. He wore this beautiful scarlet red jacket, and there was a lot of pageantry and whatnot, but the red was very symbolic to me. And the branch material is just that very bold gesture that sometimes happens, that just represented that connection between man and nature. And when you were talking about the practical aspects of this, if you ever want a ship, don't put a 10-foot branch sticking out of a piece of sculpture, because it's a difficult proposition. So I don't know if there's any other questions, but that's my story.
That's great. Thank you. Sima, I see you here. Are you feeling up to speaking?
Yes, I don't have a lot of power in my voice.
I hear you great.
But can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thank you for this chance to say something about why I do sculpture. I think that much of my work is really about me sending messages from my inner self to myself, and the reminder that sculpture helps me with. That's not really a sentence, is it? But sculpture helps me to remember that nothing is only what it at first seems to be. And sculpture reminds me, especially the head behind me, the sculpture reminds me that you can look at one side of a sculpture, one view, and be totally surprised with what's around on the other side. It's kind of, for me, it's like my life. So the grandmother piece was definitely a reminder that nothing is only what it at first seems to be. When I first smoke fired her, I hated it. It took me about a year to stop hating it enough to add the found objects and the images. And then I realized I wanted to add her voice because, well, during COVID, I needed to hear the messages that she gave me of support when I was growing up. So I took, I made low-tech excerpts from digital, no, they weren't digital, analog recordings made on those things that doctors use, that the blue records, that the dictaphones. And so I just did a low-tech compilation, and somebody turned it into something a little more high-tech. And so that's how come we could play it today. So maybe that says why I just love doing sculpture. And yes, my hands know when something is right.
Nice. Thank you. And I think that voice was meaningful for all of us to hear.
I
Yeah.
hope that it will trigger that kind of remembering.
Yes, I think we all have people in our lives that would fill that role. And I see other people here, maybe are there in the exhibition who haven't spoken yet. And if you'd like, Barbara, would you like to speak to this? Barbara Loveliner?
Hi. I mean, I like sculpture and using real materials because I think the materials themselves have energy and power, and that comes across in the work itself. And I also use a lot of different types of materials, and I guess I think, as Janet was saying, you know, you relate to what it is that you're presenting. You know, clay. And the other thing, of course, is the pleasure of working with the materials. This piece is stoneware in this show, and clay is just such a wonderful, sensuous thing to work with. You know, a lot of times when I work with it, I almost feel like my hands, or the energy is creating it, and I'll work on it. Then, you know, you wrap it up and you look at it the next day. And it's a surprise, like, oh my gosh, you know, that's what happened. And when you push on one side, it will affect the other side. So it's just a lovely, lovely way of working. And just to contrast this, another type of thing that I work with sometimes is upcycled materials and plastics, which I love their optical quality. But making things with them can sometimes be like fighting. You know, you're cutting the plastic and it's cutting you. So I guess that's what I can add to the conversation. You know, the aspect of being in there with the material.
Nice, thank you. Joanne, would you like to add?
Hi.
Yeah.
Well, it really struck me what Sima said when she said it's so many times with sculpture, things will not appear as they are, right? Like it's something doesn't appear as it is. And my stuff's about that a lot. I mean, they're so tiny that they seem very cute. They seem very approachable and cute, and almost like they belong in like a dollhouse or a little maquette scene or on a set. And when you get closer in, you start to see these details. They're never quite what you expect. And in fact, the drawer of the little table is actually a kind of rusty, sort of bloody hanger that is inside the drawer. That's sort of the secret that I kind of know is there. So for me, it's all about the materials. It's all about figuring out, I love the puzzle. I love figuring out how to do something at scale. Almost all my work has always been at some sort of scale, either very, very large or very, very small. And this series is very, very small. And figuring out how to make all the details in the rose or the carving in the wood or a usable drawer or how to have the glass look like it's floating. I love working through whatever's in my head or whatever issues are concerning me. In this case, it was the Dobbs decision. And putting it out into the world in a place where someone else can discover their own approach to it. And I find by making things very, very tiny, there's two problems. One, you never know how a material is going to react, and you never know, the materials aren't as they seem ever or at all. And you never know what's going to be the right thing. And I end up failing a lot more than I succeed. And then once I finally get it, it's like, oh, that's how you do it. And now I know how to do that this one time. I'll never need to know how to do that again. And I enjoy that part of the puzzle with sculpture. So I agree with Barbara, and I agree with Sema, and I agree with everybody when they talk about it's that sense of discovering how to manipulate a material, but also be in concert with the material. Learn from it as much as you're trying to control it, and see what it can give you back in the world. And I love doing that. I love being in concert with my materials.
Nice. I can't see everybody, so if you're in the show and you haven't spoken and you might want to speak, let me know. But maybe Sarah, would you like to speak to this? I think it'd be interesting to hear from you.
Yes, I'm happy to summarize because people had said things so beautifully. But having thought about this show and why we called it Making Space, I also have a thing about the materials. I do love to draw. I used to paint, but somehow I wanted to make things in real space, and I got excited when I discovered, actually through drawing, the drama of space. Not everything is going to show that, but it's physical and it's spatial. And I also understand and agree with some of the comments about being in concert with materials, but also sometimes they fight you, like I also often start imagery in clay because it is smoother and more immediate. And then, okay, but if I want to make this large, which somehow is an obsession, to make little things and then to make large pieces or installations, I need a structure. I need it to be strong. I have to solve these problems, or the puzzle, as Joanne was just saying, there are challenges, and somehow I keep wanting to solve those challenges, even though there's obstacles. Storage is a big one. And there are issues, but there is something so exciting about when you make your ideas real in a physical way. Mm-hmm. and explore materials. I keep exploring different ways. So I also want to just say something about, we said in our statement that having an online exhibition of sculpture is unusual because we are limiting people to, first of all, one photograph, and you have to have a compelling photograph to get your thoughts across about that sculpture, but it really is meant to be seen in physical reality. So we expanded a little bit with the details and the videos, and I really love that people brought those in, because there's so much to understand about sculpture, how and why, and the content and the meaning that people are reaching for. So I think we got quite a bit adding the words to it as well. And just, I could hear more and more about how everyone thinks about and makes their individual work. Because
I think the thing that I would add to the conversation personally, I mean, I loved it. I see things as objects. I see paintings as objects. So if I look at a painting, let's say you have me in your studio, I see it as an object. It's the size of the painting, the depth of the painting, the shape of the painting, like that's an important part of it to me. So I'm interested in making objects, and I want them in space. And I love dance and I love movement through space. And that is something I'm very aware of while I'm working. And the other thing I think that I get from textiles is the process of making something, your hand gets put in to what you do. Like, if I make something and you make something, it will look completely different, right? Because of our touch. And to me, that's something that gets communicated into the work. And I mean, that's part of from my early connection to textiles. I felt like with weaving, every thread tells a story. So that's something I'm conscious of, whether you use whatever the material is that you're using, that goes into that unspoken touch, goes into the piece. So I think it's 7:29. So I would say that we would formally end this, and if people want to keep speaking, they can. And if other artists want to speak to this for themselves, that could be interesting. But I really want to thank you all for coming. And I love that panel. I want to go, I'm inspired to go and work, right? I always have something in my hand, see? So yes, people can.
I wanted to say something about that. Well, first, thank you for the show. It's really beautiful and inspiring. And thank, both you, Eileen and Sarah, but thank all of you to me, sculpture is like a new idea. I don't even know if I belong or not, more of an installation person. But it was very exciting to hear everyone's weigh in and how these things get to you, like the textiles. I started doing that installation you saw with a textile that I found after my mother passed away, tulle, and I was like, why did she buy so much of it? I did 2 huge installations at the Queen's Botanical Garden, and then my sisters were like, oh, she bought it to do little lavender sachets, it was very cute. And but it was a bit of memorializing. But for me, I love the question, Eileen, of, what do you ultimately want this to do? I think as a figurative painter, I did a lot of subjects that were floating. And then I found out how to embed transparent things in glycerin soap and look at them. And I was crazy with the visual of it. And I would say ultimately, I would love if people with these cast colors that my work projects, and I would say that's more the work than the stitched piece itself, if they can notice the qualities of not just the light, but how our eyes adjust so quickly to the changes of light, and how all these colors, when mixed together, form white light, and how without white light, we could not see all those colors. So I don't know if my work will ever be able to convey that. It's really nice to have something big like this to think. So.
Great, thanks. Thank you, that was good. Anyone else have something to add?
Just to thank you. You did a great job putting it together. And I think that it's really a quality show and quality presentation. So I thank you so much, both Eileen, Sarah.
Yeah, very much. I agree. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. And thank you for inviting me to be part of it.
And I think Lucia has something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in this show, and I have been a sculptor and installation artist. I still do some installation, but because of space and cost, I became a printmaker. But it has a sculptural connection with the copper. I'm an etcher. But I just wanted to say that I'm very intrigued by this idea that Sarah was talking about it being an online show and it being sculpture. That's kind of a conundrum. But as an observer and not a participant, I think the way that you have been speaking about sculpture would be a wonderfully, if you could find someone to edit it and not even attribute to names, just and have it there with the work I mean, it was really enriching to me to hear all of you. And it made me remember things I had forced myself to forget in some ways. And so I would love it if you could figure out a way to share that.
Oh, thank you.
I feel privileged to have heard it.
It was recorded and it's being recorded and it will be on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, but I want poetry, I don't want data.
Okay.
You want an editor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know it's a lot of work.
Well, we'll be there, and so in the future, it is.
You want to film with poetry readings, right?
A great idea. I appreciate that.
Now, this is kind of like a love letter to sculpture and all the materials. Like, I'm so fascinated how you've made attachments to specific materials that spoke to you and that you transform them. And that's a sculpture's mind, I think. And artists do it with 2D and their materials for that. And sometimes it's great to see the blend, of course, between them all and merging the disciplines. And I think some of you did that. So it was very, very informative, very rich in your commentary. So thank you so much. That was fabulous. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks, Lois.
Sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. You can look at the world like a painter and see things and see a painter, or look at it, and see sculptures. And I think a lot of us will see things on the street and see a form and, and there are a lot of artists who bring those things home and turn them into sculptures, but you do see that way a lot, I think.
There was a lot of blending too.
Yeah.
2D and 3D.
Yeah.
I think that's part of what drew me to sculpture, which was that it is so open. It's so inclusive,
Yes, that is one of the things that always interested me. Conceptually, it's such a huge world, what's been done in sculpture in the past 50 years is so interesting. Conceptually, the big variety of work.
I wanted to invite everyone to a sculpture show I'm curating at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden that opens now on the 17th of June, and it stays until October 24th. It's called Branching Out Trees as Community Hosts. It's part of their garden-wide tree theme, but I am very happy with the way the artists will talk to each other. We have artists that represent very interesting communities, including the autistic community. And it has been a thrill for me to be working more closely with sculptors, all forms of sculptors and fabricators and so forth.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I live in Brooklyn. I have it on my calendar.
Yeah.
I think Cheryl, you can stop recording and we'll